A really stocky, powerful-looking little animal. Scientists are gaining precious clues about the world's rarest whale. Anton van Helden, an expert on some of the world's rarest whales, was sitting on the couch in July recovering from surgery when a photo flashed on his phone that would change the course of his career. But this was no ordinary whale. I immediately went, "Oh my goodness, it's a spade-toothed whale," the senior marine science advisor for New Zealand's Department of Conservation, DOC, told CNN. "A lot of people didn't believe me," he added. The spade-toothed whale is the world's rarest. Only 7 of its species have ever been recorded. It's never been spotted alive at sea. So when the near-mythical creature washed up mostly intact in July, many thought it was too good to be true. Some of the world's finest whale scientists, alongside members of the local Maori community, gathered last week in New Zealand to dissect the 16-foot, 3,000-pound mammal, marking the first time anyone has ever seen inside a spade-toothed whale. The spade-toothed whale is a member of the beaked whale family, which gets its name for its dolphin-like snouts, according to the DOC. They are a diverse and elusive group of mammals, spending much of their lives in the depths of the ocean. One of them, the goose-beaked whale, holds the world record for the longest, 3 hours and 42 minutes, and deepest, almost 3 kilometers, or 1.86 miles, dive by a whale. The first evidence of the spade-toothed whale's existence came in 1874, when lower jaw and teeth samples were collected on Pitt Island, around 500 miles off New Zealand's west coast. 2 more partial skulls, one in New Zealand and one in Chile, later enabled scientists to confirm a brand new species. The first time anyone saw the whale in the flesh was in 2010, when a mother and calf were stranded in the Bay of Plenty on New Zealand's North Island, but the carcasses weren't suitable for dissection. A stranding in 2017 in Gisborne, also on New Zealand's North Island, added another specimen to the collection. So enigmatic is the spade-toothed whale that even those like Van Helden, who have spent their whole careers studying this family of whales, have more questions about the deep-sea diver than answers. These are extreme animals. These are animals that dive to great depths, so they've got all sorts of adaptations, if you like, for that remarkable environment. When a spade-toothed whale washed up at the mouth of New Zealand's Taieri River in July, Te Renanga o Otaku, the local tribal authority where the whale beached, recognized what a groundbreaking opportunity it was to learn about a rare species. They immediately put the specimen in a freezer so that it could later be dissected, Tomai Cassidy, cultural advisor for Te Renanga o Otaku, told CNN. "For our tribe in particular, whales are highly revered animals," Cassidy said. "When they wash up, they are treated with great respect." Te Renanga o Otaku named the whale Onomia, after the traditional name of the area where the whale beached. Te Renanga o Otaku led the dissection in partnership with the DOC, an arrangement that facilitates the sharing of both scientific and cultural knowledge. "For our people, we are really open and are wanting to have collaboration, cooperation, partnerships," Cassidy said, adding that at the end of the day, everyone has a shared responsibility to protect the animals on this earth. "We're all coming at it with our own stories and backgrounds," said Van Helden, calling the dissection a rich, holistic process. The scientists worked their way through the animal, starting with external measurements, weighing its blubber, and cutting into it to identify various muscles. When CNN spoke with Van Helden, the team was just about to remove the whale's head, which they would later put through a CT scan. With each slice and turn of the whale carcass, more clues emerge. Van Helden is particularly interested to learn about how the whale produces sound, given that they spend so much time deep in the ocean away from the air. When asked what surprised him about seeing the mammal up close for the first time, Van Helden noted that the spade-toothed whale was shorter and stockier than other beaked whales. "It is really robust. It's a really stocky, powerful-looking little animal. Compared to other whales," he quickly clarified with a chuckle. "Obviously, it's enormous." Striking drone image of young sharks hunting fish wins photo competition. The dynamics between predator and prey are laid bare in a striking image of fish being attacked by sharks in the shallow waters of the Maldives, which has claimed the top prize in this year's Royal Society Publishing Photography Competition. Photographer Angela Albee, a postdoctoral researcher at the Max Planck Institute of Animal Behavior in Germany, was aided by drone pilot August Paula in capturing the winning image of the silver-side fish and 4 young sharks, according to a press release from the Royal Society. Just after sunrise or before sundown, the shallow waters of the Maldives become a clear, see-through surface, said Albee in the release. These are also the moments when we best observe the interactions between reef sharks and their prey. From the photographer's bird's-eye perspective, the raw instincts of nature come alive, as the school of fish move in almost perfect synchrony, then split to avoid the sharks, said Hugh Turvey, a member of this year's judging panel. The competition has 5 categories: astronomy, behavior, earth science and climatology, ecology and environmental science, and microimaging. Albee's image was winner of the behavior category, as well as overall winner. In the astronomy category, photographer Imran Sultan captured the intricate details of 2 nebulae in the Cassiopeia constellation found more than 7,000 light-years away. A superglacial melting lake in Greenland won the top award in the earth science and climatology category. Photographer David Garcia was able to capture the image with an iPhone when a small window of light appeared on his flight to a coastal town in western Greenland. Tired Eyes, which depicts the eyes of a bark scorpion from up close, won the top prize in the microimaging category. Photographer Jose Manuel Martinez Lopez took 110 images of a dried-out specimen to achieve the photo's effect. And the category for ecology and environmental science was won by Peter Hudson, who caught a secretary bird on camera as they were about to feast on a locust. A selection of the winning and runner-up images can be viewed in the gallery above. Study reveals strong genetic connection between period pain and depression. Up to 90% of people who menstruate experience pain during their periods. For some, that pain is severe and linked with symptoms of depression, which are often thought to be a result of the intense throbbing or cramps. But a new study published Wednesday in the journal Briefings in Bioinformatics suggests it may be depression causing period pain, due to specific genes the authors identified, while other researchers said the interplay of internal mechanisms is more complicated than that. Depression and menstrual pain significantly impact women's lives across the world, yet their connection remains poorly understood. Lead author Dr. John Moraros, dean and professor at the School of Science at Zhejiang Liverpool University in China, said via email. Our collective goal is to critically investigate these issues and improve care for women by uncovering these complex connections and finding better ways to address them. Menstrual pain is known as dysmenorrhea, which occurs in the pelvis or abdomen for typically up to 3 days once the bleeding starts. Previous studies have shown a correlation between dysmenorrhea and depression, but didn't establish a causal relationship at the genetic level, Moraros said. We used a clever approach called Mendelian randomization, he said. This method works like nature's experiment. It uses genetic data to see if having certain genes linked to depression also makes people more likely to have menstrual pain. This helps us understand cause and effect without the need to test it directly on people. The authors collected the genetic data of around 600,000 people from European populations and 8,000 from East Asian populations from various sources, including the UK Biobank study, the Psychiatric Genomics Consortium, and FinGen, a large-scale research project in genomics and personalized medicine. Next, we use bioinformatics, Moraros said. It helps us find patterns in the genes and biological pathways that connect depression and menstrual pain. The study contends it has demonstrated a significant causal relationship between depression and dysmenorrhea, with the mood disorder increasing the odds of menstrual pain by 1.51 times, or 51%. The authors found several genetic pathways and proteins through which depression may affect reproductive function. The research team also found that sleeplessness, experienced by some people with depression, may worsen the link between depression and dysmenorrhea. No evidence was found to support a causal effect of dysmenorrhea on depression. However, the authors said, the findings help expand the important and often overlooked discussion around mental health and period pain. I'm excited about some of the potential for some of these larger database-style studies, especially as more genetic testing is advancing, said Dr. Amory Amies Ohlschlager, professor of obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Washington School of Medicine. She wasn't involved in the new research. But there are also concerns about some of the study's broader assertions, according to Amies Ohlschlager and other experts. Where I think the paper's falling short is that because there's a strong genetic connection, you attributed that as a causal relationship, and I think it's still a stretch, said Dr. Claudio Soares, president of the Menopause Society and professor in the Department of Psychiatry at Queen's University School of Medicine in Kingston, Ontario. Soares also wasn't involved in the study. Below, experts elaborate on newfound and known associations between period pain and depression, why a genetic cause can't be inferred from a genetic connection, and ways you can manage depressive symptoms and painful periods. Two-way street between mood and painful periods. Many people who have depression or other mood disorders experience pain more acutely, said Amies Ohlschlager, also chair of the Committee for Clinical Consensus, Gynecology at the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. That increased intensity is due to how the brain interprets and experiences pain signals, and to depression limiting one's ability to cope with pain, she added. But Amies Ohlschlager said she also wouldn't tell someone with dysmenorrhea, you must have this gene, since for many, some level of pain during menstruation is normal. Primary dysmenorrhea is caused by highly active prostaglandins, the chemicals that cause the uterus to contract during the menstrual cycle, Amies Ohlschlager said. That's why ibuprofen is so effective, because it's a prostaglandin inhibitor. The disorder is also associated with early menopause, Soares said. Additionally, the Mendelian randomization method assumes there are no environmental factors that could influence someone's depression status, period pain, or genetics, which contradicts the fact that the relationship between those things can be multifactorial and different for everyone, experts said. There are probably also underlying mechanisms making people more vulnerable to having both depression and dysmenorrhea, Soares said. Since the study doesn't have more personal data at an individual level, it's unclear whether differences in individual severity and treatment of depression would also affect the results, Amies Ohlschlager said. On the other hand, experts noted that the opposite relationship, period pain or reproductive shifts preceding depression, has occurred in both human and animal research and in clinical practice. We know that's true in patients with some chronic pelvic pain conditions, something we call central sensitization, where the brain becomes more sensitive to even normal stimuli and starts to feel them as painful, said Dr. Hugh Taylor, the Anita O'Keefe Young Professor and chair of the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at the Yale School of Medicine. Taylor wasn't involved in the study. In animal models, endometriosis, a secondary cause of dysmenorrhea, led to depression. Endometriosis is a chronic disease in which tissues similar to the uterine lining grow outside, rather than inside, the uterus, causing pain and fertility issues. And women with dysmenorrhea may be more likely to experience postpartum depression, Taylor added. Experts have also known for years that having your first period at an early age increases your risk for depression, Soares said. Managing depression and painful periods. If you're experiencing dysmenorrhea, Amies Ohlschlager wants you to know a few things. First, it doesn't mean you're simply depressed. But secondly, if the pain is interfering with your life and not alleviated by treatment such as ibuprofen or heating pads, you should seek out an evaluation for mood disorders and secondary causes of dysmenorrhea, which can include uterine fibroids, an infection, or ovarian cysts in addition to endometriosis. This type of integrated healthcare can lead to more personalized treatments, better outcomes, and reduce the stigma surrounding mental and reproductive health issues among women, Morrow said. Additionally, methods experts know to be effective in treating period pain can also improve depression, Amies Ohlschlager said, such as exercise, yoga, stress reduction techniques, dietary changes, and good sleep quality and quantity. Medication can be helpful when none of those things work. Supreme Court wrestles with FDA's attempt to curb access to flavored vapes. The Supreme Court on Monday pressed the Food and Drug Administration on whether it followed the law in its effort to keep flavored e-cigarettes off shelves, weighing a lawsuit from a multi-billion-dollar industry that has come under scrutiny because its products are popular with school-age children. After more than an hour of oral arguments, the agency appeared to have support from the court's three-member liberal bloc and possibly a few of its conservatives as well, at least for a limited outcome that could give the incoming Trump administration a chance to review the FDA's actions to block flavored vaping products. Public health advocates have been sounding the alarm in recent years about a spike in vaping among young Americans. The FDA reports that 19% of high school students and 4.7% of middle school students vaped in 2020, a far higher share than students who smoked. At issue were a series of denials during the first year of the Biden administration for vaping products that officials said are geared toward minors with flavors like pink lemonade, Rainbow Road, and Jimmy, the Juice Man Peachy Strawberry. The appeal is also entangled with broader political pressures. President-elect Donald Trump, for instance, recently vowed to save vaping, as well as a debate over the power of federal agencies that the court's 6-3 conservative supermajority has repeatedly sought to curtail. At least some of the court's conservatives were concerned with how the FDA reviewed the market applications from the companies, questioning whether regulators changed the type of evidence of health benefit required for approval. In describing the industry's argument, conservative Justice Clarence Thomas suggested the method the FDA used was a moving target. Either they weren't clear, or you changed the guidance as time went on, Thomas said. Curtis Gannon, a deputy solicitor general representing the FDA, disputed that framing and said the law itself was clear about what evidence the agency required. Conservative Justice Samuel Alito more directly questioned the FDA's review process, suggesting the agency told the vaping industry that they might be able to present some evidence of public health benefit to win approval, but that we're not going to tell you concretely what that something else might be. But Justice Brett Kavanaugh, another member of the court's conservative wing, repeatedly signaled he could support the FDA. You agree that, at the end of the day, the agency has to make a choice, and it's going to be a choice with uncertainty? Kavanaugh asked the lawyer arguing for the companies. The court's three-justice liberal wing appeared to be on the side of the agency. We know nicotine is addictive. You put it into addict people, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said. Presumably, you put it into addict adults and children. The vaping industry says its nicotine-delivering products help Americans transition off cigarettes, and that the dessert-themed flavors are attractive to adults. The industry has argued the FDA violated federal law by changing the rules for how the products were evaluated. But Justice Elena Kagan, a member of the court's liberal bloc, said that it was exceedingly clear that the federal regulators were skeptical about the stated health benefits of vaping. Given that, she said, it would have made sense for the industry to present as much evidence as it possibly could to win approval. There's just not a lot of mystery here about what FDA was doing, Kagan said. Recognizing the harm caused by youth smoking, Congress passed a law in 2009 giving the FDA new powers to regulate tobacco products. In 2016, the FDA decided that e-cigarettes qualified as tobacco products, and it began reviewing authorization applications for millions of vaping products. The industry says that the FDA changed its method in the middle of the process, requiring companies to show that flavored products are more effective than tobacco-flavored products at helping smokers quit or cut back on cigarettes. The conservative Fifth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals sided with the industry in January, finding that officials had perpetrated a regulatory switcheroo, sending manufacturers on a wild goose chase to get approval. 7 other appeals courts have rejected similar challenges of the agency's denials. The case is one of several pending before the Supreme Court that faces an uncertain future in part because of Trump's election last month. The former and future president has offered inconsistent guidance on the industry, at one point moving forward with a ban on flavored vaping products only to dial that effort back weeks later. We have a new administration coming in, Eric Heyer, who argued on behalf of the vaping companies, told the justices. The president-elect is on record saying, "I'm going to save flavored vapes." We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. Denny Hennigan, vice president of legal and regulatory affairs for the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids, told CNN that any change by the Trump administration would face legal scrutiny and that FDA officials would need to demonstrate to courts that their changes are also based in science. The decisions FDA has been making on flavored e-cigarettes are solidly grounded in the science. There is no question that these flavored products have an enormous appeal to young people, Hennigan said. We're hopeful that if the Trump administration revisits this issue, it will be clear that these are products that cause great harm to kids or are highly addictive. Trump is in, and some Americans say they're out. Interest in moving abroad spikes after the election. Right after the election, Dana McMahon rented a tiny apartment in Paris, moved up the dates for a flight originally booked for a vacation, and started the paperwork to apply for a 4-year visa she hopes will allow her to work in the French capital. McMahon, 50, has dreamed of living in France for a while. She first thought about bidding adieu to the United States when Donald Trump won the presidential election in 2016, she said. But while the idea had been brewing for some time, she had yet to take the leap. But I knew, going into this, that if this is the way the election went, then this had to happen, said McMahon, who lives in Louisville, Kentucky. McMahon objects to Donald Trump's character and past behavior, and has blogged about her distress that the nation chose him over a confident, competent, easily qualified black woman. She's not alone. Interest in moving out of the U.S. has spiked, with immigration businesses reporting a surge of inquiries since the election. And some Americans say the results have sealed their plans to leave the U.S. Big interest in moving abroad from Americans. It's impossible to know how many Americans are seriously contemplating leaving the country. But there's certainly evidence of a post-election surge in people exploring the idea. Google Trends shows that U.S. searches for Move Canada reached a 12-month peak between November 3rd to 9th, before dropping back down to a level that's just slightly above where the term has hovered through most of the last year. But the surge of interest is unlikely to translate to a mass exodus. Moving to Canada was a hot topic after the 2016 election, but immigration statistics gathered later didn't show a significant bump. Moving abroad is a complicated process, and there are a number of factors, jobs, kids in school, aging parents, that can hold back those who consider it. Still, there's a spike in people looking into the possibilities. Immigration services sites Welcome to Portugal and Bureaucracy.es, which help Americans relocate to Portugal and Spain, told CNN they saw huge increases in traffic to their websites after the election, as well as increased inquiries into visa processes. Bureaucracy.es said the firm has seen more than a 300% increase in clients booking consultations for more information on the visa process in Spain since the election results were announced. Marco Permunian of Italian Citizenship Assistance, a firm that helps pave the way to Italian citizenship, said he asked his team in Los Angeles to start work early the day after the election. By 6 a.m. California time, the phone was already ringing with people saying they wanted to move out, he said, noting that the spike was roughly double what the firm calculated in 2016 after Donald Trump won. Permunian said he has also recently heard from people who were considering leaving the U.S. if Trump lost the election, but with less of a sense of desperation than those who do not support Trump. It's scary to do this. Dana McMahon got a tattoo on her forearm during a recent visit to France that says Allons Y, French for let's go. And that's what the writer, who is a Democrat, plans to do in January, when she'll touch down in Paris to start a new life in a place she has visited since 2001 and said always felt like home. Once she learned the election results, McMahon said she moved up the dates of a flight she'd booked to Paris for a vacation later in 2025 and for a much longer stay. Then she reached out to friends in the city and cast a wide net on social media asking if anyone knew of a place she could rent. By the next day, she found a tiny apartment in Paris' 20th arrondissement for €1,100 per month, including utilities. She cashed in an IRA to pay for it. McMahon plans to enter France on a tourist visa, and since the election has started the process of applying for the country's 4-year talent visa, a residence permit granted to self-employed people that include artists and writers. The plan is that once McMahon gets the visa, her husband and dog can join her. But she's under no illusion things will be easy, she said. It's scary to do this. I'm 50 years old. My life is here in Kentucky. My family and friends. But this is really important I go and find out if Paris is truly my home. And I believe that it is. At least we'll know we tried. Others haven't made as many concrete plans yet, but feel an urgency to leave the United States. One black woman in a red state says living in the United States right now feels like being a crab in a pot of water where the heat is being turned up to boil. The former federal law enforcement officer, who requested anonymity because of security concerns, said she woke up on November 6th, turned to her husband and said, "It's go time." The woman, a Democrat and mother of 2, first started thinking about moving out of the United States in 2023 after the Supreme Court gutted affirmative action in college admissions. But the election was a turning point. I knew that if Trump was elected, it would be full steam ahead, she said. The African-American woman in her 40s said the affirmative action decision makes it seem like African Americans are on equal footing and that racism is done and over with. And there's no bias. And that's just not the case. She is frustrated. Just when it seems that things are starting to get better, it's like we take one step forward and two steps back. For this family, the election feels like too many steps back to ignore. But her kids weren't on board right after the election. Then one of them heard from a friend who had received one of the racist text messages referencing slavery that were sent to black people around the country after the election. Her child was scared and understood then why their parents wanted to leave. Do I think that they would try to put black people back into slavery? Realistically, no. I don't think that black people would go. But still, it's just the fact that people are even in that mindset to send something so awful, said the mother, who lives in a state that went for Trump. She said she has started looking into the visa requirements in France, the family's top choice for a move, followed by the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain. She may look into the possibility of getting hired by a firm abroad or pursue studies in those countries. And while she absolutely would have stayed in the U.S. had the Harris/Walz ticket won, she said by summer the family plans to be gone, as long as the visas come through. We're going to figure it out, and if it doesn't work out there, we'll come back. We're not denouncing our citizenship. At least we'll know we tried, she said. It's staying in the U.S. right now that feels untenable. I just wanted to get my degree and make change here, said the woman, who is in graduate school. But I feel like staying here now is like the people that stayed in Germany, the women that stayed in Iran in the 70s, the people who stayed in Afghanistan after knowing U.S. troops were pulling out. A major undertaking. Moving to another country is a big decision that requires not only navigating a new bureaucracy, but acclimating to the culture, learning the language and finding friends and a routine, among other things, said Jen Barnett of Expatsy, a company that helps Americans sort through the process of moving abroad. In the 10 months leading up to the election, Barnett said a total of 60,000 people had completed a test on her company's website that helps match them with countries best suited to their requirements and situation. In the weeks after the election, Barnett said, more than 48,000 additional people had already taken the test. To be sure, only a fraction of the people who look at this option follow through with a drastic move. Even at home in the U.S., it's not always easy to get up and switch states for one more aligned with your political beliefs. Mai Nguyen, who lives in Florida, said she wants to leave the state for somewhere else in the U.S., but is unable to because she shares custody of one child with her ex-husband. Not to be dramatic, but it doesn't feel like it would be a safe environment to raise a girl anymore, said Nguyen, who is a Democrat. I don't believe our public education system will be able to keep up with more progressive states, and I don't believe our laws will protect our girls. Nguyen said she might consider a move to her hometown of Da Nang in Vietnam at some point in the future, but her family is more likely to make a move closer to home. We will be looking at a blue state first, she said. U.S. wildlife officials move to add iconic monarch butterfly to threatened species. Every winter, millions of monarch butterflies journey thousands of miles across North America to spend winters in the forests and mountains of central Mexico. But over the years, the beloved butterfly has seen such a troubling decline in its population that U.S. wildlife officials on Tuesday announced a proposal to help protect the species. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service proposed listing the monarch butterfly as threatened with extinction under the Endangered Species Act. The law states that a species is labeled threatened when it is likely to become endangered within the foreseeable future. Flitting from flower to flower, sipping nectar to pollinate plants, the monarch plays a significant role in maintaining its ecosystem's biodiversity. The species, with its iconic orange and black markings, is a vital food source for various animals. However, growing threats such as habitat loss from illegal logging, exposure to insecticides, and the climate crisis have dramatically shifted the monarch's breeding and migratory patterns. Monarch's steep decline. The loss of pollinators like the monarch could have far-reaching consequences for ecosystems and the people who rely on them. The butterfly's eastern migratory population is estimated to have declined by roughly 80%, while the western migratory population plunged by more than 95% since the 1980s, according to U.S. wildlife officials. Without any immediate action, officials warned that the monarch could likely vanish from the continent for good before the end of the century. Already in 2022, the International Union for Conservation of Nature categorized the migratory monarch butterfly, specific to North America, as endangered due to climate change and habitat loss. In just 1 year between 2021 and 2022, the presence of monarch butterflies in their Mexican forest wintering grounds dropped by 22%, according to a recent report from the World Wildlife Fund. Eduardo Rendon Salinas, the lead of the Monarch Butterfly Program for WWF Mexico, previously told CNN that the climate crisis is a major contributing factor to the decline. Droughts, frost, and heat across the continent are killing milkweed, the monarch's food source, and destroying their habitat. Rendon Salinas said what's happening to monarch butterflies is representative of what pollinator species such as bees, birds, and other butterflies face globally. Pollinators are responsible for 75% of the production of the food for humans, he said. To save these monarchs, humans must reduce the emissions of gases warming the atmosphere. A lot of monarchs are dying. That is my call to action. Plan to protect monarchs. If finalized, the proposed rule would build and expand conservation efforts, including protecting nearly 4,400 acres in California as habitat vital for the Western populations. But with President-elect Donald Trump, whose previous administration attempted to water down protections for endangered species, set to take office, experts say there are additional things people can do to protect the species. Stabilizing and reversing population trends requires an all-hands approach that not only relies on government protections, but also collaboration among landowners, farmers, conservationists, and everyday citizens, said Clay Bolt, the World Wildlife Fund's manager of pollinator conservation. U.S. wildlife officials, too, remain hopeful. Despite the monarch's fragility, it is remarkably resilient, like many things in nature when we just give them a chance, Martha Williams, director of the Fish and Wildlife Agency, told CNN. Science shows that the monarch needs that chance, and this proposed listing invites and builds on unprecedented public participation in shaping monarch conservation efforts. Williams said providing monarch butterflies with sufficient milkweed and nectar plants, even in small areas, can go a long way in helping them recover. Working together, we can help make this extraordinary species a legacy for our children and generations to come, she said. Voyager 1 overcomes its latest challenge to keep operating more than 15 billion miles away. NASA engineers have successfully restored contact with Voyager 1, and the spacecraft is operating normally after its dwindling power supply caused a weeks-long blackout. The issue began in October, when the aging probe automatically switched from its primary X-band radio transmitter and began relying on a much weaker S-band radio transmitter to communicate with its mission team on Earth. The farthest spacecraft from Earth, Voyager 1, is currently exploring uncharted territory about 15.4 billion miles, 24.9 billion kilometers away. The probe autonomously made the transmitter swap when its computer determined that Voyager I had too little power after the mission team sent a command to turn on one of its heaters. The unexpected change prevented engineers from being able to receive information about Voyager 1's status, as well as the scientific data collected by the spacecraft's instruments, for nearly a month. After some clever problem-solving, the team was able to switch Voyager 1 back to its X-band radio transmitter and receive its daily stream of data again starting in mid-November. The probes were never really designed to be operated like this, and the team is learning new things day by day, said Kareem Badarudin, Voyager mission manager at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, in an email. Thankfully, they were able to recover from this issue and learn some things, but it's just one of many challenges the mission team has had to face in recent years as Voyager 1 and its twin probe, Voyager 2, continue to defy the odds and explore space more than 47 years after they lifted off. Decreasing power, creative solutions. The probes, which launched weeks apart in 1977, have long outlasted their original missions, designed to fly by the largest planets in our solar system over the course of 4 years. Now, they're in interstellar space, and the only spacecraft to operate beyond the heliosphere, the sun's bubble of magnetic fields and particles that extends well beyond the orbit of Pluto. Both spacecraft are powered by the heat from decaying plutonium that is converted into electricity. Each year, the probes lose about 4 watts of power, according to NASA. That's equivalent to a small, energy-efficient light bulb. We've known that power is running out on board both Voyagers for some time, Badarudin said. This year it forced the mission to turn off a science instrument on Voyager 2. But these probes have lasted so much longer than anyone anticipated they would, and it's amazing that we're squeezing every last bit of power and science out of them. The mission team began turning off any systems that weren't crucial for flying the probes about 5 years ago. Some of those systems included heaters that were designed to keep the science instruments operating at the correct temperature. But to their surprise, all the instruments kept working, even at temperatures lower than those at which they had been tested decades before. Occasionally, engineers send commands to Voyager 1 to turn on some of its heaters and warm components that have sustained radiation damage over the decades, Bruce Wagner, the Voyager Mission Assurance Manager, told CNN in November. He can help reverse the radiation damage, which degrades the performance of the spacecraft's components, he said. But the command sent to the heater on October 16th triggered the spacecraft's autonomous fault protection system. If the spacecraft draws more power than it should, the fault protection system automatically shuts off systems that aren't essential to conserve energy. The team discovered the latest issue when it couldn't detect a response signal from the spacecraft on October 18th. Given that the Voyager probes have already shut off all of their non-essential systems except for science instruments, the fault protection system shut off the X-band transmitter and switched to the S-band transmitter because the latter uses less power. Voyager 1 has been using the X-band transmitter for decades, but the S-band hadn't been employed since 1981 because its signal is much fainter than the X-band's. The team had to seek out the faint S-band signal before they could restore reliable communication with the spacecraft. The mission team successfully commanded Voyager 1 to revert to the X-band transmitter on November 7th and began collecting science data the week of November 18th, and they are actively resetting the system used to synchronize Voyager's 3 computers. This is one of the last tasks to make sure Voyager is back to how it was before the transmitter issue. This transmitter switch is just one of several innovative hacks NASA has used to overcome communication challenges with a long-lived mission this year, including firing up old thrusters to keep Voyager 1's antenna pointed at Earth, and coming up with a solution for a computer glitch that silenced the probe stream of science data to Earth for months, keeping the Voyager probes online. The Voyager team has computer models to help them predict how much power the spacecraft's heaters and instruments are expected to use. But the fact that turning on one heater triggered the fault protection system is a signal to the team that the probe's future is more uncertain than they realized. This implies that the virtual model that the team uses to calculate how much power is available, and thus how many systems/instruments can be operated, has uncertainties and/or is incomplete at the level that the mission is currently working at, which often involves a margin of less than a watt, Badarudin said. There used to be a small reservoir of power available for situations like this, but earlier this year the team opted to use that reservoir to keep science instruments going longer. The Voyager probe started out with 10 science instruments each. Certain instruments were shut off on Voyager 1 in 1990 to conserve energy because those tools were no longer needed after the spacecraft completed its flybys of Jupiter and Saturn. Now just 4 instruments operate on each spacecraft, and they're used to study charged gas called plasma, magnetic fields, and particles in interstellar space, and the Voyager probes are the only spacecraft studying this uncharted territory. Voyager 1 and its twins send back science data continuously through the Deep Space Network, a system of radio antennae on Earth, with about 6 to 8 hours of the probe's detections returning each day. Data isn't stored on board, so anything that was sent home by Voyager 1 during the transmitter issue was lost. However, the science that Voyager is doing now is really about the big picture and long-term observations, so the team is not too concerned with this dropout, Badarudin said. The bigger issue is how long can we keep the science instruments going with the current power available. Wolves may be pollinators as well as predators, study suggests. On one of his first trips to study wolves in Ethiopia in the late 1980s, biologist Claudio Solero observed a highly unusual behavior. These local predators were deliberately licking the vibrant flowers of the red-hot poker plant that grows in the country's highlands. Relatively few mammals have been documented drinking nectar, and this was the first reported case of a large carnivore doing so, according to new research. I wasn't quite expecting the wolves had a sweet tooth. They were clearly enjoying dessert, Solero, a professor of conservation biology at Oxford University, said in an email. He and other scientists have informally observed Ethiopian wolves exhibiting this odd behavior over past few decades. Now, a study published in the journal Ecology in November and co-authored by Solero documents it in detail for the first time and suggests that the wolves may even help to pollinate the distinctive flower. Solero and his colleagues followed 6 wolves from 3 different packs frequenting the flowers over 4 consecutive days from late May to early June, the start of the plant's 6-month blooming season. All 6 animals were reported to have licked the flowers, though the total time spent licking the flower heads varied a lot, from around 1 minute to 1.5 hours. The endangered predators are regularly monitored as part of the Ethiopian Wolf Conservation Program, founded by Solero in 1995 following his first few visits to the region. Ethiopian wolves almost exclusively prey on small rodents. The nectar simply supplements their meat-based diet, according to Solero. Researchers have explained this dietary choice with the dessert hypothesis, a theory that describes how a species will make use of an extra resource that they enjoy but don't need when it is available. Other animals also enjoy the sweet-tasting nectar of the country's highland flowers, he added, noting baboons are very partial to them. Mountain goats will go and have a go at them. Domestic dogs will also partake. After watching the local shepherd's children playing with and licking the flowers, Solero couldn't resist trying them himself, describing them as indeed very sweet and quite pleasant. The significant amount of pollen which accumulates on the wolves' muzzles, and the fact that some individuals were seen visiting up to 30 different blooms in a single foray, could mean the wolves help pollinate the plant by transporting pollen from flower to flower, according to Solero. It's the first possible case of a large carnivore acting as a pollinator, the study noted. Wolf-pollinated flowers? Red-hot poker plants are thought to be largely pollinated by birds, according to Jeff Ollerton, a visiting professor at Northampton University in the United Kingdom and author of the book Pollinators and Pollination, who wasn't involved in the research. They've got quite brightly colored, often red or orange, tubular flowers and lots of nectar, Ollerton, a pollination ecologist, said. He suggested that the plants could also be benefiting from wolf pollination, but not to a great extent. It's not impossible. If they are pollinators, I think they probably play a much smaller role than the birds, Ollerton said. While red-hot pokers can grow to 175 centimeters, 5 feet 9 inches tall, Ethiopian wolves measure up to around 60 centimeters, 2 feet, in height and 100 centimeters, 3 feet 3 inches, in length. Ollerton said that their smaller size may allow the wolves to access only the lowest flowers, which tend to be the oldest and those that have either already been pollinated or have ceased to be reproductively viable. Nevertheless, mammal pollination is certainly underdocumented, Ollerton noted. These observations are just the first step in really understanding whether the wolves are pollinators or not. Among mammals, bats are considered the major pollinators. However, further work is still needed to find out whether the potential damage to flowers caused by non-flying mammals' nectar feeding outweighs the pollination benefits they provide to the plants. Future wolf-related research could look at how consistently the predators pick up pollen on their muzzles and how often flowers are visited by each of the different pollinator species, Solero said. A flagship species, endemic to Ethiopia's Afro-alpine meadows and living exclusively in a handful of isolated areas, just 454 adult Ethiopian wolves remain. The species has been most significantly impacted by habitat loss, driven by Ethiopia's rapidly expanding population and diseases transmitted from domestic dogs. Through research and the implementation of various conservation initiatives, the Ethiopian Wolf Conservation Program has helped to stabilize the wolf population, resulting in the IUCN changing their status from critically endangered to endangered in 2004. By engaging the public with exciting research, such as the discovery that Ethiopian wolves drink nectar, Solero seeks to improve familiarity with the species. It's an obvious model for conservation policy, he said. With Africa's rarest canid acting as a flagship species, Solero hopes that wolf conservation measures will trickle down into more effective protection to benefit biodiversity and local communities. Zepbound leads to more weight loss than Wegovy, drug maker Eli Lilly says. Adults taking Zepbound lost 47% more weight on average than those taking Wegovy, according to clinical trial data from drug maker Eli Lilly. In a head-to-head comparison of the two GLP-1 drugs, adults living with obesity or overweight who were taking Zepbound, the brand name for tirzepatide, lost more than 20% of their weight on average after about a year and a half, compared with an average of about 14% weight loss among those taking Wegovy, the brand name for semaglutide. That translates to an average weight loss of about 50 pounds for those taking Zepbound, compared with an average weight loss of 33 pounds for those taking Wegovy. People taking Zepbound were also more likely to reach specific weight loss targets than those taking Wegovy. About 32% of those taking Zepbound lost at least 25% of their body weight, compared with 16% of those taking Wegovy, Lilly said in a news release. The data have not yet been published in a peer-reviewed journal. Tirzepatide and semaglutide both mimic the effects of the gut hormone GLP-1, which stimulates the body's production of insulin and slows the passage of food through the stomach. GLP-1 also signals the brain to help control appetite. Tirzepatide also stimulates a second gut hormone, called GP, which may help boost its effects. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved versions of tirzepatide and semaglutide to treat both type 2 diabetes and obesity. Eli Lilly manufactures tirzepatide under the brand name Mounjaro for diabetes and Zepbound for chronic weight management, while Novo Nordisk manufactures semaglutide as Ozempic for diabetes and Wegovy for weight management. Given the increased interest around obesity medications, we conducted this study to help healthcare providers and patients make informed decisions about treatment choice. Dr. Leonard C. Glass, Senior Vice President of Global Medical Affairs at Lilly Cardiometabolic Health, said in a statement on Wednesday. Zepbound is in a class of its own as the only FDA-approved dual GIP and GLP-1 receptor agonist obesity medication, and it's changing how millions of people manage this chronic disease. The new clinical trial data from Lilly echoes findings from earlier research based on electronic health records comparing outcomes for those taking tirzepatide and semaglutide. However, earlier research included some data from individuals living with both obesity and diabetes. The 751 participants in the Lilly trial did not have diabetes. Instead, the trial focused on adults living with obesity or overweight who have at least one other comorbidity: hypertension, dyslipidemia, obstructive sleep apnea, OSA, or cardiovascular disease. The most commonly reported side effects among those taking both Zepbound and Wegovy were mild to moderate gastrointestinal symptoms, Lilly said. The drug maker plans to publish the results from this clinical trial in a peer-reviewed journal and present at a medical meeting next year. Black Beauty was found on Earth in 2011. Now, scientists say it has revealed a new clue to life on Mars. A mineral trapped within a Martian meteorite that fell to Earth has revealed traces of water on Mars that date back 4.45 billion years, according to new research. The zircon grain may contain the oldest direct evidence of ancient hot water on the red planet, which may have provided environments such as hot springs that are associated with life on Earth. The discovery opens up new ways of understanding whether Mars was ever habitable in its ancient past. It also adds more support to observations already gathered by the fleet of spacecraft orbiting and roaming the red planet, which have spotted evidence of where rivers and lakes once existed on the Martian surface. But key questions remain about when exactly water first appeared on Mars and how it evolved and disappeared over time. Scientists analyzed a sample from the Black Beauty meteorite, also known as NWA 7034, that was found in the Sahara Desert in 2011. The meteorite was ejected from the Martian surface after another celestial object hit the planet between 5 million and 10 million years ago, and fragments of it have served as a key source of studying ancient Mars for years. The new study, published in the journal Science Advances on November 22nd, focused on a single grain of the mineral zircon spotted within the meteorite. The team's analysis shows that water was present just 100 million years after the planet formed, which suggests that Mars may have been able to support life at some point in its history. Our data suggests the presence of water in the crust of Mars at a comparable time to the earliest evidence for water on Earth's surface, around 4.4 billion years ago, said lead study author Jack Gillespie, researcher at the University of Lausanne's Faculty of Geosciences and Environment in Switzerland, in a statement. This discovery provides new evidence for understanding the planetary evolution of Mars, the processes that took place on it, and its potential to have harbored life. Minerals as time capsules. Rocks may hold the answers to some of the biggest remaining questions about Mars, including how much water was present and whether life ever existed on the planet. That's why meteorites like Black Beauty are of such interest to scientists. Carl Agee, a professor and director of the Institute of Meteoritics at the University of New Mexico, first presented the space rock to the scientific community in 2013. The Black Beauty meteorite contains hundreds of rock and mineral fragments, each with a different part of the 4.5 billion years of Martian history, said study co-author Dr. Aaron Cavesey, a planetary scientist and senior lecturer of the Space Science and Technology Center at Curtin University, in an email. It is the only source of pieces for the geological puzzle of pre-Noachian Mars. The Noachian period occurred from 4.1 to 3.7 billion years ago, and little is known from direct measurements dating to the pre-Noachian period on Mars, between 4.5 billion and 4.1 billion years ago, though it's crucial to understand because it serves as the first page in the Mars history book, Cavesey said. But Black Beauty has revealed some of its secrets. Many of the rock fragments the meteorite contains show that the Martian crust endured a number of impacts, causing a massive amount of upheaval on the planet's surface, he said. The space rock also contains the oldest known pieces of Mars, including the oldest zircons, Cavesey said. Zircon, used in products such as jewelry, ceramic tiles, and medical implants, is a hardy mineral that can help scientists peer into the past and determine the conditions present when it crystallized, including the temperature at the time and whether the mineral interacted with water. Zircon contains traces of uranium, an element that acts as a natural clock, said Gillespie, who was a postdoctoral research associate at Curtin University's School of Earth and Planetary Sciences at the time of the study. This element decays to lead over time at a precisely known rate. By comparing the ratio of uranium to lead, we can calculate the age of crystal formation. The zircon in Black Beauty was unaltered by its trip to Earth and fiery entrance into our planet's atmosphere before crashing down in the Sahara, because it was protected by its location within the meteorite's interior, Cavesey said. During the analysis of the zircon grain, the study team detected unusual amounts of iron, sodium, and aluminum, suggesting that water-rich fluids left these traces on the zircon as it formed 4.45 billion years ago. Such elements aren't usually found in crystalline zircon, but the researchers' atom-scale studies of the zircon showed the elements incorporated into the crystal structure and lined up like fruit stands in a market, Cavesey said. We could tell by the patterns of how the iron, aluminum, and sodium are found inside the zircon that they were incorporated into the grain as it grew, like layers in an onion, Cavesey said. On Earth, zircons from hydrothermal systems, which form when water is heated by subsurface volcanic activity like the upward flow of hot magma, have similar patterns to those found in Black Beauty. If hydrothermal systems existed in the Martian crust 4.45 billion years ago, liquid water likely made its way to the surface. Our experience on Earth shows that water is critical for habitats capable of supporting life, Cavesey said. Many environments on Earth host life in hot water systems, including hot springs and hydrothermal vents. Such environments may have given rise to the earliest life forms on Earth. Our new study shows that the crust of Mars was warm and wet in the pre-Noachian period, meaning that habitable environments may have existed at that time. Getting up close with Mars, Cavesey is curious to determine whether hydrothermal systems like hot springs were prevalent when magma was helping form the red planet's crust between 4.48 billion and 4.43 billion years ago, or if they were more episodic. If hydrothermal systems were a stable feature on early Mars, it would indicate habitable conditions may have persisted over a considerable time span, Cavesey said. This is now a testable hypothesis that can be addressed by collecting more data from Martian zircons. Until samples can be returned directly from Mars, the Black Beauty meteorite is one of the best windows into how the Martian crust formed and what the early surface of Mars was like, said Brian E. Horgan, co-investigator on the Perseverance rover mission and professor of planetary science at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. Horgan was not involved in this study. Finding evidence of hydrothermal systems within the subsurface from one tiny grain of zircon aligns with scientific theories on the amount of water and volcanic activity that existed on ancient Mars, she said. And these earliest potentially habitable environments would have been shielded from radiation by a strong planetary magnetic field, which Mars lacks today, Horgan added. Scientists are still trying to explain how the red planet lost its protective magnetic field. Currently, the Perseverance rover is climbing the rim of Jezero crater on Mars, an ancient lake once filled with water 3.7 billion years ago. Some of the rocks the rover has encountered may have been formed by hydrothermal systems, Horgan said. The rover will take samples from the rocks because they could preserve evidence of ancient microbial life. As much as the meteorites can tell us, we can do even better with a carefully selected and intact rock sample from a known location on Mars with good geologic context, Horgan said. So this paper is a great motivation for bringing our Mars samples back to Earth to study with the same level of detail for years to come. Sorry, Real Housewives. Gen Z is all about Mormon wives. 27-year-old Sydney Nowak was surprised to see dirty sodas, a non-alcoholic beverage that has gained popularity because of its frequent appearance on Hulu's The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, on the menu at a Topgolf in Las Vegas. But she was even more surprised that her 19-year-old cousin visiting from the UK knew what it was. I would have never expected someone else who's not from this country to know what a dirty soda is, but we connected over the fact that it's so relevant in pop culture amongst the younger groups today, Nowak said. The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives follows a group of 8 married Mormon women in their 20s and early 30s living in Utah. A second season is currently in production after its first season premiere was the most viewed Hulu unscripted original series this year, and the third most watched original series across major streaming platforms the week of its release, according to Nielsen data. In some ways, it's the streamer's buttoned-up answer to the sometimes salacious lifestyle shows that dominate reality TV. It's also part of a larger trend that has put some unlikely voices in the spotlight. Nowak and Hannah Yeager, both Southern California locals, noticed their friends talking about The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives nonstop, prompting them to discuss it on their lifestyle podcast Busy Babes. They believe the show's popularity is being driven by Gen Z and young millennials, who made up 54% of viewers during the show's peak viewing week, according to Nielsen. You know how our parents or people a little bit above us in age group were obsessed with The Real Housewives, Nowak said in one podcast episode. Is this our Real Housewives? Before the 8 Utah-based women were featured in the Hulu series, they were known for sharing their lives as young Mormon mothers on TikTok as #MomTalk, helping them gain nearly 16 million followers across their accounts. Carnegie Mellon University English professor Kathy M. Newman said their popularity may just be a part of America's longtime fascination with unique religious or cultural groups. Certain elements of Mormon culture, like foregoing vices like coffee and alcohol and instead indulging in dirty sodas, beverages concocted from mixing flavored syrups, are fascinating for those unfamiliar with Mormonism. It's more of a prurient fascination with some sort of culture that's perceived as different, Newman said. As the Mormon Wives began to gain an audience on TikTok in 2022, one of the mothers, Taylor Frankie Paul, revealed she and other Mormon couples have been taking part in soft swinging, or consensually sharing partners. Lisa Filippilli of Select Management Group said in an interview with Collider that a show was already in the works at the time the scandal began attracting attention. The show came together soon after. This group of women in particular, we always knew was going to be very special. It was just waiting for our perfect time to bring on the right partners, Georgia Berger, also of Select Management Group, told the publication. Fascination with the #TradWifeLife. Nara Smith and Hannah Nealman, known to many as the Mormon women leading the tradwife trend, have attracted young audiences by the millions this year, Whether they are reacting to the extreme impracticality of Smith's fashion and cooking or searching Neilman's social media for signs, she is the oppressed wife portrayed in a viral Sunday Times article earlier this year. Montclair State University Communications Associate Professor Joel Penny doesn't think their popularity among young generations is driven by a shock factor alone. The pandemic, global conflicts, a cost of living crisis, and increasing mental health issues have plagued the young generation during their most formative years and brought about a sense of dissatisfaction and hopelessness. There's a sense of we're losing a sense of meaning and we need some direction, Penny said. To remedy that, some, whether intentionally or not, are turning to traditional values to find more structure and meaning, most noticeably through reclaiming traditional gender roles, he added. That popularity of #TradWife definitely goes into this anxiety about gender roles and gender norms. The conventional way of life tells this very neat story. It gives very clear answers to what are people's roles in society, what are people's identities. There's a pattern of this historically, Penny added, referencing the rise of the Christian fundamentalist moral majority group in the 1970s as a reaction to the social movements of the 60s counterculture. But in many ways, the show embraces the Mormon wives' progressive desires, from talking about their sex lives to getting divorces, and pushes back on the conservatism within their own community. That producers have said is the point, and it seems to be working. It's keeping me on the edge of my seat, Nowak said. Pair of Judy Garland's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz sell at auction for $28 million. A pair of Judy Garland's ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz, which were stolen from a Minnesota museum almost 20 years ago, sold at auction for $28 million Saturday. Bidding opened at $1.55 million and escalated quickly. According to the lot page, 25 bidders participated in the auction. Only 2 bidders remained toward the end, and the slippers were sold to a bidder participating over the phone. With auction house commissions, the slippers sold for a staggering $32.5 million, nearly 11 times its estimate of $3 million. At $32.5 million, the slippers are the most valuable cinema treasures in the world, and they helped make this the most successful entertainment auction ever held, according to Robert Wilinski, Vice President for Public Relations at the Heritage Auction. The ruby slippers are one of the most beloved artifacts from the iconic 1939 movie. The slippers were much more than just a piece of Hollywood memorabilia, much more than a valuable piece of industry history, said Rhys Thomas, the author of The Ruby Slippers of Oz. They transcended Hollywood, to the point where they represented the powerful image of innocence to all America, he said according to the lot page. Collector Michael Shaw had lent the slippers to the Judy Garland Museum in Grand Rapids, Minnesota when they were stolen in 2005. They were recovered in 2018 during a sting operation in Minneapolis, CNN previously reported. FBI agents reunited the slippers with Shaw, who likened the experience to a heartfelt reunion with a long-lost friend. Terry Martin and Jerry Hal Salerman, both in their 70s, were separately charged with the theft. Martin pleaded guilty in 2023, while Salerman, who was charged in 2024, maintains that he's innocent, CNN previously reported. Only 4 pairs of the slippers used in the film are still known to exist, per the North Dakota Attorney's Office. 1 pair is housed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, though they were initially mismatched. Several of the known pairs have made the journey from Garland's feet to fan collections. An MGM customer discovered a few pairs of ruby slippers on the studio lot in 1970. 1 pair was auctioned that year and eventually donated to the Smithsonian, and he kept at least 2 pairs for himself, though Shaw later bought one of them. Another of the original pairs is on display at the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures, donated by a group of benefactors including Leonardo DiCaprio. And in 1939, a lucky Tennessee teenager won slippers worn on-screen in a contest, which she kept until the late 1980s when she sold them to a fellow movie fan. Actor Debbie Reynolds, matriarch of another Hollywood dynasty, also bought a rare pair from the lucky MGM customer, prototype slippers with curly toes that were never used in the film. A galaxy named for its resemblance to a sombrero looks distinctly different in new image. The James Webb Space Telescope has captured a surprising new view of a long-studied galactic neighbor, the Sombrero Galaxy, revealing a perspective that looks quite different from the wide-brimmed Mexican hat for which it was named. Taken with the Space Observatory's mid-infrared instrument, or MIRI, the image showcases the galaxy's smooth inner disk, rather than the glowing core that usually shines in visible light images taken with the Hubble Space Telescope. Webb's view makes the crown of the sombrero invisible, changing the appearance of the galaxy to resemble a bullseye. Meanwhile, distant galaxies glimmer in the background of the image. The galaxy, also known as Messier 104 or M104, is about 30 million light-years from Earth in the Virgo constellation. French astronomer and comet hunter Pierre Méchain discovered it in 1781. Méchain named the galactic find for his colleague Charles Messier, who famously cataloged star clusters and nebulae. Webb's sensitive instruments can detect celestial objects through varying wavelengths of infrared light, which is invisible to the human eye, to reveal previously unseen details of the universe. The fine details of Messier 104 detected by MIRI also showcase the galaxy's outer ring, revealing how dust, a crucial ingredient for celestial objects such as stars and planets, is structured and distributed throughout the galaxy. Previously, when NASA's now-retired Spitzer Space Telescope observed the Sombrero Galaxy, the outer ring appeared smooth, but Webb's new imagery reveals the complex, clumpy nature of the dusty ring, which could suggest the presence of a stellar nursery. Webb's new detections also enabled astronomers to spot carbon-containing molecules, such as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, in the dust ring, which further suggests that the galaxy's outer ring may be home to star-forming regions. But the Sombrero Galaxy is quiet in terms of star formation compared with other galaxies such as Messier 82. 10 times as many stars are born in the latter galaxy than the estimated 100 billion stars that exist in the Milky Way. Scientists estimate that the rings of the Sombrero Galaxy produce less than one solar mass of stars each year, with one solar mass equaling the mass of our Sun. In contrast, the Milky Way is responsible for creating about 2 solar masses a year, according to NASA. The supermassive black hole at the center of the Sombrero Galaxy is also less active than those at the center of other galaxies, slowly consuming material from Messier 104 and releasing a bright but small jet of radiation. But the galaxy is full of 2,000 globular clusters, or groups of hundreds of thousands of old stars gravitationally held together, providing the perfect place for astronomers to conduct comparison studies of stars that are the same age but differ in mass and other aspects. The Webb telescope, launched in December 2021, will begin its 4th year of observing the universe in July. Scientists across the globe have applied for observation time with the telescope to search for exoplanets and their atmospheres, stars, and distant galaxies. After 30 years of not eating meat, I've made some unexpected discoveries. At a Thanksgiving gathering 3 decades ago, I went cold turkey on eating meat. When I look back at that meal, I'm embarrassed by my gleeful, holier-than-thou pronouncement at the dinner table. My father solemnly shook his head as I made a toast. To quote George Bernard Shaw, I announced, "Animals are my friends, and I don't eat my friends." No one else made a toast. A college course on nonviolence had inspired me months earlier, so my family wasn't surprised. More than family, my poor roommates at the time got the worst of my newfound sanctimonious zeal. Do you know how they treated the cow you're eating? What his last hours were like? I had asked my friends as they bit into a burger, winning no hearts or minds with my approach. They fruitlessly reminded me that as recently as the day before Thanksgiving, I ate meat too. 30 years later, I'm still at it. The vegetarianism, that is not the ethical soapbox speeches. And while I continue to believe it's the right choice for me, I have made unexpected discoveries about myself, others, and the world. Making others defensive is unhelpful. At first, challenging others about their food choices was something I obnoxiously enjoyed about being vegetarian. Except for the mass slaughter of millions of helpless birds, it's a very nice holiday. I wrote in my college newspaper column ahead of my first Thanksgiving anniversary of vegetarianism. But I eventually learned that putting people on their heels is a highly ineffective way to convince someone to think differently. I went from poking people with a sharp stick to avoiding the subject altogether, especially over meals. Vegetarianism is a terrible topic of dinner conversation with non-vegetarians. I'm more likely to say now when someone asks me about it. After all these years, I don't know of a single person I convinced to give up meat. And that's fine. I do it for my own reasons. But if someone is truly veg-curious, I'm still happy to engage gingerly, and may do so in the comment section of this piece below. Where we draw ethical lines around eating is largely arbitrary. No one has the high moral ground for ethical eating, except maybe the Jains, followers of a non-violent religion that includes the wearing of masks to avoid accidentally swallowing bugs. No sooner had I bragged that I don't contribute to the slaughter of animals than vegans asked me uncomfortable questions about my awareness of dairy and egg farming treatment of cows and chickens. And vegans are ethical bottom feeders compared with fruitarians, who don't even kill plants for their sustenance. It should be noted that fruitarianism is generally considered nutritionally unsustainable. Then there is the matter of being able to afford a healthy diet that eschews readily available and yes, subsidized meat and dairy options. Are any of us who are lucky enough to have enough food in a position to judge those who struggle with food insecurity? The bottom line is that most of us make choices about how much animal and animal-sourced products we eat, whether for environmental, health, or ethical reasons, or for cost and availability, or simply for taste preference. Consuming less meat and animal products generally means less animal suffering and less of a burden on the planet, and maybe one's personal health. Those are facts, but no one can say where the personal line of consumption should be drawn. Going meatless wasn't the big sacrifice I imagined. While I like to think of myself as a meatless martyr when I first went vegetarian, the truth is that I was largely subsisting on a college diet of pizza, fries, and beer anyway. And over the past 3 decades, vegetarian options on restaurant menus have grown alongside my palate. Even extensive travel abroad hasn't been that difficult. 20 years ago, I lived abroad and traveled around the world for a couple of years, and my culinary choices did not compromise my adventures, with the slight exception of Mongolia. Science on my plate is delicious. What I really love now is all the fake meat and non-dairy milk available today. I'm still waiting for the vegetarian substitute for crab cakes. I grew up in Maryland. But I don't miss hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken nuggets, and meatballs now that there are multiple options available in most grocery stores that taste exactly alike. I remember the real thing. When I crave meat, which I do, I have many options to satisfy that craving without harming animals in the process. The world is getting more culinarily progressive. Before I got married, my in-laws thought I was a little odd for not eating meat. Now they mainly eat vegetarian themselves. They still think I'm odd for other reasons. This is a trend I hear all the time when I don't get in anyone's face about what they choose to eat. I eat very little meat. I've heard thousands of times after I say I'm vegetarian. The propaganda is working, and it's not actually propaganda. The research backs me up. The more we're aware, and the more delicious alternatives become available, the more people are happy to convert themselves. And partial conversion still helps our hearts, our planet, and mostly its non-human animals. As someone who joined the club 30 years ago, let me say, welcome to the right side of history, everyone, no matter where you choose to draw your line. The turkeys thank you too. Ancient saber-toothed predator found in Spain is the oldest of its kind. Before dinosaurs walked the earth and tens of millions of years before the first mammals appeared, distant mammal relatives with long, serrated canine teeth were the dominant carnivores on land. Called Gorgonopsians, the earliest animals in this lineage have long been missing from the fossil record. But the discovery of a newly identified Gorgonopsian, the oldest saber-toothed animal ever found, is filling a long-standing blank space in the group's history. These slender predators are known mostly from bones that are less than 270 million years old, but the recent fossil find is thought to be an unprecedented 280 million to 270 million years old. The newfound Gorgonopsian adds to one of the earliest branches of the Therapsid family tree. The Therapsida order includes not only Gorgonopsians, but also the ancestors of modern mammals and other non-mammalian groups that are now extinct. The finding is a notable puzzle piece that could help shed light on the earliest forebears of mammals, experts said. What is a Gorgonopsian? It's not a lizard dog. Gorgonopsians vanished around 252 million years ago, and their lineage died with them. All Gorgonopsians had dagger-like canine teeth, and species ranged widely in size. Some were as small as cats, while others were as big as polar bears. Fossils of the newly described Gorgonopsian included its knife-like canines, parts of its jaw, some vertebrae, ribs, tailbones, and toe bones, and most of the bones from a hind limb, researchers reported Tuesday in the journal Nature Communications. The specimen's blunt snout skull was incomplete, but is estimated to measure about 7 inches, 18 centimeters, long, and the animal would have been as tall as a medium-sized dog and weighed roughly 66 to 88 pounds, 30 to 40 kilograms. According to study co-author Ken Angiolczyk, MacArthur Curator of Paleomammalogy at Chicago's Field Museum of Natural History. Other than being four-legged and having a long tail, the Gorgonopsian wouldn't have looked very dog-like, Angiolczyk said. Similar to reptiles, Gorgonopsians didn't have fur or visible ears, he said. But although the animal physically resembled lizards in some ways, please don't call it a lizard dog, he told CNN. Lizards are a kind of reptile, and non-mammalian therapsids like Gorgonopsians are part of a completely different evolutionary lineage, part of the lineage that includes mammals, Angiolczyk said. While mammals and reptiles share a common ancestor that lived about 320 million years ago, they are separate lines of descent. Gorgonopsians do share some traits with their mammal cousins. One of those is having teeth of different shapes and sizes, with those teeth providing different roles in the feeding system, Angiolczyk said. That's something that's very common in mammals today. Unlike mammals, Gorgonopsians seemingly replace their teeth, including their long canines, repeatedly throughout their lifetime. Mammals today, for the most part, just have one replacement cycle of teeth, Angiolczyk said, whereas Gorgonopsians and other therapsids generally were more like a crocodile today, where they have teeth that are erupting continuously, oldest of its kind. Paleontologists discovered bones of the newfound Gorgonopsian in Majorca, a Mediterranean island that's part of Spain, during expeditions in 2019 and 2021, said senior study author Giuseppe Fortuny, leader of the Computational Biomechanics and Evolution of Life History Research Group at the Miguel Crisafont Catalan Institute of Paleontology in Spain. The most interesting thing about the specific specimen that we describe is its age. It is pretty certainly the oldest known Gorgonopsian, as well as the oldest known therapsid to date, Fortuny told CNN in an email. There is a big-time gap in the fossil record of therapsids between when they are predicted to have evolved based on our knowledge of relationships of synapsids, a larger vertebrate group that includes therapsids, and when they actually show up in the fossil record, Fortuny said. Scientists have previously calculated that therapsid fossils should start showing up in rocks that are about 300 million years old, and we don't actually see them, up until now, until about 270 million years ago, Angiolczyk said. The new specimen, which dates back at least to that point in time and is likely even older, aligns with that gap, helping researchers to clarify when therapsids evolved. The search for early therapsids. Fine-tuning the evolution of therapsids during the early part of the Permian period, 299 million to 252 million years ago, is particularly important for tracing the ancestry of mammals, said Roger Benson, Macaulay Curator of Dinosaur Paleobiology at the American Museum of Natural History in New York City. Everything from the early Permian on the mammal line is outside of this group Therapsida, and all our knowledge of therapsids comes from the Middle Permian and later, said Benson, who was not involved in the research. But paleontologists have long suspected there were therapsids before the Middle Permian. We just didn't find their fossils yet. This fossil is the most promising candidate for an early Permian therapsid so far. The location of the find was also unusual. Gorgonopsid fossils were previously known only from arid, high-latitude sites in South Africa and Russia, the study authors reported. During the Permian, Majorca was smack in the middle of the supercontinent Pangaea, which existed from 335 million to 200 million years ago. In this equatorial zone, what's now Majorca would have experienced very wet and very dry seasons. One of the things people have wondered is if maybe important events in mammal ancestry took place in the tropics, and we've been missing fossils of these types of animals at the right age to know about that, Benson said. That's one of the intriguing implications of this fossil, is the potential that important events in mammal ancestry occurred at lower latitudes and environments that we haven't sampled so much in the fossil record. Finding the oldest documented Gorgonopsian in Majorca hints that the earliest therapsid fossils are yet to be discovered in places where paleontologists previously didn't look for them, Angielewicz said. It's long been thought that the big temporal gap in the therapsid fossil record might correspond to more geographic sampling, he said. The fact that Majorca is a new place for finding therapsids helps to support that idea that we're not necessarily looking in the right places to find the first therapsids. Are scented candles bad for you? What the science says. If you're a candle lover, you have probably seen some brands offer soy or beeswax versions as natural alternatives to typical wax options. But are conventional candles actually bad for you? And if they are, how much better could the ones marketed as healthier or non-toxic really be? Concerns about the safety of candles are rooted in the chemical reactions that occur when you burn them, as well as in the artificial fragrances and colorants that contribute to the various scents you may love. The candles of chief concern are those made from paraffin, which is a cheap byproduct primarily sourced from the refinement of petroleum. Paraffin is the most used candle wax worldwide. According to the National Candle Association, the major trade association representing U.S. candle manufacturers and their suppliers. However, few studies on candle emissions or their potential effects on human health exist, and conclusions from the research are mixed. There is no overall conclusion that paraffin candles either will or won't harm your health, said pulmonologist Dr. Sobia Farouk, a clinical assistant professor at the Cleveland Clinic's Lerner College of Medicine. But the risks may also depend on various factors including candle type and quality, how often and how long you're burning it, the airflow in the space where you're burning it, your health status, and more. Below, experts share the science behind potentially harmful candle emissions, their concerns surrounding the lack of regulation, and ways to make the best decision for you. What the candle science shows. When you burn a paraffin candle, it releases volatile organic compounds, or VOCs, gases that easily and quickly vaporize into the air at room temperature, said Dr. Ariful Haq, a physician researcher at Yan'an Hospital affiliated to Kunming Medical University in China, via email. These compounds are commonly emitted from paints, cleaning products, cosmetics, air fresheners, car exhaust, fuel-burning appliances such as gas stoves, and more, according to the American Lung Association. Some VOCs are harmful on their own, while others can react to other gases and form pollutants once they are in the air. One of the VOCs often emitted from candles is toluene, a clear, colorless vaporized liquid that has a distinctive smell and naturally occurs in crude oil. Toluene is registered as a toxin with established exposure limits by some regulatory agencies, including the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. That's because it's a neurotoxin associated with dizziness, headaches, or more serious effects of prolonged exposures, Haq said. Benzene, a known carcinogen, is another VOC released by paraffin candles, Haq added. Long-term exposure to this chemical has been linked to blood disorders such as leukemia. When inhaled, benzene can also be a respiratory irritant. Paraffin candles also emit the VOC's polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which contain benzene and formaldehyde, another known carcinogen to humans. A good number of studies have assessed candle emissions under controlled settings as well as in homes and shown that burning candles contributes to poor air quality and increases the risk of inhalational exposure to chemicals of concern, said Dr. Sarah Evans, assistant professor of environmental medicine and climate science at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, via email. Some evidence also suggests that candles may emit toxins even when unlit, according to an April 2015 study that simulated indoor use. The air concentrations of VOCs found in some candle studies have been insignificant when compared with levels previously deemed unsafe. Other research, however, suggests the opposite. In the April 2015 study, the concentration of formaldehyde emitted from a lit strawberry-scented candle amounted to 2,098 parts per billion, which far exceeds the 0 to 400 parts per billion range various sources consider acceptable. A lit kiwi melon-scented candle had a total emission concentration of 12,742 parts per billion. Now, candles made from soy wax, beeswax or stearin, coconut oil, or animal fats are often considered healthier. But anything that is burned emits harmful particulates or chemicals, Evans said. So, these candles also release VOCs into the air. It's just that paraffin wax is usually more polluting according to some studies. The risk of toxic emissions is greater when candles are scented or dyed, which is another reason why paraffin-free candles aren't immediately in the clear. This is because artificial fragrances also have VOCs, including phthalates, which have been linked to learning and behavior problems, obesity, impaired development of the reproductive system, and more, Evans said. The unscented candle in the 2015 research also caused concerning concentrations of toxins, but had the lowest amount compared with its scented counterparts. The National Candle Association maintains that candles are safe for use in the home, a spokesperson said in a statement. The association's stance is based on an October 2021 study that consisted of burning 24 soy and paraffin candles, scented and unscented. However, the research was a joint effort between the NCA, the European Candle Manufacturers Association, and the Latin American Candle Association. The NCA's members include some of the most popular conventional candle companies and one of the largest oil companies in the world. The association is also headed by people employed at top conventional candle brands. Additionally, there is hardly any regulation on candles, Evans said. On its website, the NCA states that its members adhere to ASTM International, formerly the American Society for Testing and Materials, standards. But the ASTM standards pertain to fire safety and packaging, not to candle composition, Evans added. ASTM standards are voluntary and not enforced. Products are not checked for compliance. There are no regulations that require complete labeling of candle contents and no third-party testing to verify manufacturers' claims, she added. This lack of oversight is why companies can label candles as soy-based, even if only a small percentage of the wax is soy, depending on the region and labeling standards, Hack said. Ways to more safely scent your home. Some of the chemicals potentially emitted by candles leave the body quickly, while others may accumulate over time, Evans said. Only a few studies have examined the direct human health outcomes of burning candles. However, according to Evans, we can extrapolate from what we know about the adverse health effects of these products of combustion in other settings. Taken together, there is sufficient evidence to suggest that burning candles in the home has the potential to be harmful to health and may be worth eliminating from the long list of pollutants many people are exposed to every day, Evans said. Vulnerable individuals in particular should consider this guidance. Those groups include people with respiratory issues, such as asthma or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, Farouk said. All considered, Evans doesn't ever burn candles and discourages doing so, she said. Farouk, the pulmonologist, on the other hand, does use candles. She's just careful about what she buys and where she burns them, she said. Evans' advice even goes for candles scented with essential oils. Some people consider these to be harmless, but that's not always true since burning them can alter their chemical composition, Hack said. Some studies find that diffusion of essential oils causes breathing problems and interferes with memory and decision-making, Evans said. Some types of oils are toxic to children and pets. It can also be difficult to verify the purity of essential oil products that may contain a mixture of harmful chemicals. Like candles, essential oils are not regulated or tested to ensure they are free of contaminants. Visit these sites to learn which essential oils may be harmful for children, cats, and dogs. If you want to continue using candles, experts have some tips for how you can minimize any potential health risks. Choose candles labeled as 100% soy wax, beeswax, or stearin wax when possible. Ensure the wick is cotton, wood, or synthetic, and free from cores made of metals including lead or zinc. Lead wicks have been banned in a few countries, including the United States, Australia, and Denmark. If you simply can't resist using scented candles, look for those with essential oils or candles labeled as phthalate-free. Avoid dyed candles. Keep lids on candles when not using them. View the manufacturer's website or contact the company to learn more about the composition. Some components, such as fragrance, are considered trade secrets, so manufacturers may not disclose individual chemicals, Evans said. Burn candles in a well-ventilated area to reduce indoor air pollution from any soot, VOCs, or smoke. Keep the area ventilated after blowing candles out. The room should also be spacious. A living room is better than a bathroom. Avoid lower-quality candles, typically indicative by their price, since those may use conventional waxes or fragrances. Extinguish candles that emit heavy black smoke. You can also help prevent this type of smoke by using a candle wick trimmer or scissors to keep wicks trimmed to a 1/4 inch. When burning scented candles, do so in small doses to avoid headaches or irritation of the respiratory system or eyes. Don't burn candles around children or people who are pregnant or have respiratory conditions. It's important to optimize the quality of the air that you breathe inside your home, where we spend most of our time, Evans said. Belly fat linked to signs of Alzheimer's 20 years before symptoms begin, study says. As the size of a person's belly grows, the memory center of their brain shrinks and beta amyloid and tau may appear. All of this occurring as early as a person's 40s and 50s, well before any cognitive decline is apparent, according to new research. Both beta amyloid plaques and tau tangles are early signs of the brain's march toward a possible Alzheimer's disease diagnosis. Amyloid plaques typically appear first, with tau tangles arriving later as the disease progresses. The more amyloid or tau you have in the brain, the sicker the brain becomes, said senior study author Dr. Cyrus Raji, associate professor of radiology at Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. The way we can track a sicker-looking brain is lower blood flow, Raji said. We also saw brain atrophy, or a wasting away of gray matter, in a part of the brain's memory center called the hippocampus. Less blood flow in the memory center of the brain may cause shrinkage, another key biomarker for Alzheimer's, said preventive neurologist Dr. Richard Isaacson, director of research at the Institute for Neurodegenerative Diseases in Florida. He was not involved in the new research, since the study found these relationships decades before cognitive decline and an expected diagnosis. Having laser-sharp focus on reducing belly fat can be one of our most powerful tools to fight this terrible disease, Isaacson said in an email. Obesity is a worldwide epidemic, according to the World Health Organization, which estimates more than half the world will be overweight or obese within 10 years. In the United States alone, it's estimated nearly 260 million Americans will be overweight or obese by 2050 unless policymakers take immediate action. Conservatively, obesity as a risk factor for dementia affects at least 1% of American adults, so that means over 2 million individuals could have dementia from Alzheimer's disease attributable to their obesity, Raji said. It's a big public health issue, Raji said. We're trying to understand how obesity at midlife in the 40s and 50s is a risk factor for Alzheimer's disease, which doesn't usually appear symptomatically until the 60s, 70s, or 80s. Visceral fat is key. A pilot study by Raji and his team, released in November 2023, found a type of deep abdominal fat called visceral fat was linked to inflammation and amyloid buildup in the brains of 32 men and women in their 40s and 50s. At this point in the research, the presence of tau was not confirmed. Visceral fat wraps itself around the major organs of the body and is completely different than the subcutaneous fat on the rest of the body. Subcutaneous fat typically makes up 90% of the body's fat, according to the Cleveland Clinic. Most of a person's body mass index, BMI, reflects subcutaneous fat, not visceral fat, Raji said. So, we measure visceral fat using abdominal MRI, and we have a specialized computer program that can measure the actual volume of visceral adipose tissue. The study also used gold standard amyloid positron emission tomography, or PET, scans to verify the presence of amyloid and tau in the brains of study participants, and magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI, to measure levels of visceral fat that occur when waistlines expand. The more visceral fat one has, The more inflammation happens in the body, and it's much worse, in truth, than the inflammation that occurs with subcutaneous fat, Raji said. Visceral fat receives more blood flow due to its placement near organs and is more hormonally active than subcutaneous fat, Raji said. We looked at insulin resistance via fasting plasma insulin levels and glucose tolerance tests and found the most abnormally high insulin was seen in people with higher amounts of visceral fat, he said. Visceral fat is the more metabolically abnormal, diabetes-inducing fat. That study also found a relationship between deep belly fat and brain atrophy, or a wasting away of gray matter, in a part of the brain's memory center called the hippocampus, Raji said. Brain atrophy is another biomarker of Alzheimer's disease. Tau tangles identified for first time. The study has continued, adding an additional 48 participants to make a total of 80. The average age of those in the study was 49, and the average BMI was 32. A BMI of over 30 is considered obese by the medical establishment. Updates on the findings so far were presented in abstracts at the Radiology Society of North America's 2024 conference on Monday, Raji said. What is new is that we demonstrate for the first time that higher amounts of visceral or hidden fat is related to abnormally high tau proteins in persons up to 20 years before they could develop the earliest symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, Raji said. Previously, we had only showed a link between visceral fat and amyloid. The PET scans showed that as visceral fat levels went up, so did levels of both amyloid and tau, according to the new research. This work is highly impactful and clinically relevant for the 47 million Americans, and hundreds of millions more globally, who have early signs of Alzheimer's starting silently in their brains, but have not yet developed symptoms, Isaacson said. Ways to fight visceral fat. There are smart ways to reduce belly fat that can reverse these trends, Isaacson said. First, don't focus just on body weight, but also body composition. This can be done easily at home by using a biometric scale, or can be monitored by using an annual DEXA scan ordered by a healthcare provider. This scan is also commonly used to track bone density as we age, he said. Exercise is key, Isaacson added, but do it by working out smarter, not harder. To more efficiently get into fat-burning mode and lose body fat over time, I suggest taking a brisk walk at a steady pace, working up to at least 45, 60 minutes 2 to 3 times per week, he said. You want to follow what experts call Zone 2 training, which can be tracked using a simple method, being able to carry on a conversation while exercising, but just barely, Isaacson said. Walking fast on a treadmill at a slight incline or walking with a weighted vest are ways to get into the fat-burning zone more quickly and efficiently, he said. Tracking and building muscle mass is also key. The more muscle a person has, the higher their metabolism and the better they can burn fat through the day. If your muscle mass is low, try strength training for at least 30 minutes twice a week or more, and be sure to eat adequate amounts of protein intake throughout the day, he added. Charlotte Hornets apologized for gifting PlayStation 5 to child and then taking it away off camera. The Charlotte Hornets have apologized for appearing to gift a PlayStation 5 to a child during an on-court skit, only to later take it back from him off camera. The incident, which occurred during Monday's game against the Philadelphia 76ers, was captured in a post on X that now has 4.5 million views. The post shows the Hornets mascot, Hugo, dressed as Santa Claus handing the PlayStation 5 to a young fan, who takes the gift with a mixture of shock and delight on his face. However, the X user, who said the child is his best friend's nephew, said Hornet staff later took the PlayStation back from the boy off camera and handed him a jersey instead. Perhaps a Grinch outfit for Hugo would have been more fitting instead. Speaking to local outlet Queen City News, QCN, the boy's uncle, Alexei Phillips, said a Hornets staff member whispered to him beforehand that the kids were not going to keep the presents they received on the court. Crucially, this information wasn't relayed to his 13-year-old nephew, who Phillips said is called Jack. At this point, everybody thinks that Jack is going to get this PS5, including all the dancers, all the cheerleaders, everybody basically starts congratulating him, Phillips told QCN. There was even a Hornets dancer who actually gave him the PS5. She starts to pack it up for him in the bag. Then we get kind of all the way to the backstage and, the guy who kind of found us in the first place, he starts to kind of take it away. And everybody thinks he's joking because nobody would think he'd be taking the PS5 from the kid. It got pretty awkward because eventually he had to make it clear that he wasn't joking. The Hornets later apologized, saying the incident was an on-court skit that missed the mark. The skit included bad decision-making and poor communication. Simply put, we turned the ball over and we apologize, the Hornets said in a statement posted by WCNC Charlotte reporter Nick Carboni. We have reached out to the family and are committed to not only making it right, but to exceeding expectations. We will be providing the fan with the PS5 that he should have taken home last night, along with a VIP experience to a future game. CNN has reached out to the Hornets for comment. Phillips also told QCN that the Hornets reached out to the family to apologize and added that there were no hard feelings towards the franchise. The funny thing is, if he had just gone out in the first place and they just gave him a jersey out there on the court, he would have been stoked, Phillips said. So it looks like the Grinch didn't steal Christmas after all for Jack. Fossilized poop reveals secrets of how dinosaurs came to dominate Earth. The earliest dinosaurs were unremarkable, bit players on a supercontinent crowded with other ancient reptiles when they first evolved around 230 million years ago. Fast forward 30 million years, however, and dinosaurs dominated the planet, coming in all shapes, sizes, and forms, while many of their reptilian counterparts had died off. Exactly why they were so evolutionarily successful is a long-standing mystery. But new research suggests some answers to this question may be contained in what they left behind, dinosaur droppings. We know a lot about their lives and extinction, but not how they came about, said Martin Kvarnström, lead author of a study on the rise of dinosaurs published Wednesday in the journal Nature and a paleontologist at Uppsala University in Sweden. To better understand the extinct giants, Kvarnström and his colleagues investigated overlooked fossils known as bromelites, remnants from the digestive system, aka dinosaur poop and vomit. They studied more than 500 fossils gathered over a 25-year period from around 10 sites in the Polish Basin, an area in the south of Poland. The remains dated back to a range of time spanning the late Triassic to early Jurassic period, from around 247 million years ago to 200 million years ago. Bromelites contain so much paleoecological information, but I don't think paleontologists really have acknowledged that and have seen them mostly as like a joke. You collect a few coprolites because it's funny, Kvarnström said, referring to fossilized feces. They found that the fossilized poop and vomit, scientifically known as coprolites and regurgitolites, respectively, increased in size and variety over time, indicating the emergence of larger animals and different diets. By studying the shape and contents of the bromelites and linking them to fossilized skeletons and footprints found at the sites, researchers were able to identify and categorize the animals that likely produced them. Doing so allowed the researchers to understand how many and what type and size of dinosaurs, as well as other vertebrate animals, were in the landscape at a given point in time. The analysis, which took 10 years to complete, allowed the team to piece together why dinosaurs came to prominence. Revelations from ancient poop. In some cases, it was possible to make a visual assessment of what type of dinosaur was responsible for a bromelite based on a fossil size and shape. A spiral-shaped coprolite likely came from an animal with a spiral gut, but in many others, it was necessary to take a detailed 3D scan of the bromelite's internal structure using specialized equipment to understand what the fossils contained. Ancient digestive remnants can look like something left by your dog in the park, and it's very evident what they are. In other cases, especially herbivores, they're more difficult to recognize, he said. The team scanned the fossil's internal structure at the European Synchrotron Radiation Facility in Grenoble, France. The massive facility, a ring-shaped synchrotron 844 meters, 2,800 feet, in circumference, generates X-ray beams 10 trillion times brighter than medical X-rays and allows scientists to study matter at the molecular and atomic level. It's a bit like a CT scanner at the hospital. It works in the same way, but with much higher energy. We need that to get this really high resolution and also good contrast, Kvarnström said. The coprolites contain the remains of fish, insects, and plants, and sometimes other prey animals. Some remains were beautifully preserved, including tiny beetles and half-complete fish. Other coprolites contain bones crushed by predators. The skeletal fossils, footprints, and bromelites from sites in Poland provide a series of discrete temporal snapshots that demonstrate a transition from a world with few dinosaurs to one in which they dominated, said Lawrence H. Tanner, a paleontologist at the Department of Biological and Environmental Sciences at Le Moyne College in New York. Tanner was not involved in the study. Using the techniques from this study in other locations would provide a more global context and build a nuanced picture, Tanner wrote in a commentary piece that published alongside the research. Reconstructing Dinosaurs' Rise. The authors came up with 5 phases to explain dinosaurs' ascendancy. Their ancestors were omnivorous, eating plants and animals. They evolved into the first carnivorous and plant-eating, or herbivorous, dinosaurs. A key turning point came when increased volcanic activity may have led to a more diverse range of plants to feed upon, followed by the emergence of large and more diverse herbivore dinosaurs. In turn, this phase led to the evolution of the giant carnivorous dinosaurs beloved by movie directors and childhood books at the beginning of the Jurassic period 200 million years ago. The supremacy of the dinosaurs endured until an asteroid that struck off the coast of what's now Mexico 66 million years ago doomed the dinosaurs to extinction. Before this latest research, 2 theories had been proposed to explain the transition from a world dominated by non-dinosaurian reptiles to one in which the dinosaurs were ascendant, the study noted. One model suggested that dinosaurs evolved to physically outcompete their rivals, according to the study. The dinosaurs' upright stance resulting from the positioning of their hind limbs directly beneath their body, combined with flexible ankles, made them highly agile and more efficient than their evolutionary competitors, such as reptiles with splayed legs. Alternatively, some researchers believe dinosaurs were by chance better able to adapt to dramatic changes in climate that took place at the end of the Triassic. Kvarnström said the research based on the Polish fossils suggested a combination of the 2 hypotheses provided a more likely explanation, with a complex interplay of several processes that meant dinosaurs were better able to cope with how environmental shifts changed what food was available. For example, the study found that food residues extracted from bromelites belonging to Dicynodonts, an ancient mammal relative with a turtle-shaped head, suggested that creature had a restricted diet, feeding principally on conifers. It disappeared from the fossil record around 200 million years ago. Dinosaurs, on the other hand, appear to eat a wide array of plants. For example, the team found that the contents of coprolites from the first large herbivorous dinosaurs, the sauropodomorphs, contained large quantities of tree ferns but also many other types of plants and charcoal. The team suspects that charcoal helped detoxify the ferns, which can be toxic. Jegors Niedziedzki, the study's senior author and a paleontologist based at Uppsala's Department of Organismal Biology, Evolution and Development, said the reason behind the dinosaurs' evolutionary success was a message that still applied today. Eat your veggies and live longer. Giant cyborg cockroaches could be the search and rescue workers of the future. The patient is submerged in an ice bath as an anesthetic for its impending surgery. When sufficient numbness is achieved, University of Queensland student Lachlan Fitzgerald begins the procedure, carefully attaching a tiny circuit board to its back to create a part-living, part-machine biohybrid robot. The patient is, in fact, a beetle, and the backpack-like device sends electrical pulses to its antennae, allowing Fitzgerald to control its movements while tapping into its natural agility. Only when it leaves the desired path that we want it to be on do we intervene and tell it to actually go this way, instead of the way it was actually heading, says Fitzgerald, who is studying mathematics and engineering. He hopes to create an army of insect machine search and rescue workers. We see a future where after an urban disaster like an earthquake or a bombing, where humans can't safely access the disaster site, being able to send in a bunch of cyborg beetles to navigate the disaster zone quickly and efficiently, he says. The biorobotics lab where Fitzgerald works is putting control backpacks onto giant burrowing cockroaches, a species native to Australia, which can grow up to 3 inches, 8 centimeters, long, and darkling beetles. Species from the darkling family can be found scurrying through environments ranging from tropical savannas to arid deserts across the world. Having to handle the bugs doesn't bother Fitzgerald. No, they definitely don't gross me out, he says. Cyborg insects have an edge over traditional robots, according to Fitzgerald. Insects are so adaptable compared to an artificial robotic system, which has to perform so much computation to be able to deal with all these different scenarios that might get thrown at it in the real world, he explains. Fitzgerald says cyborg search and rescue beetles or cockroaches might be able to help in disaster situations by finding and reporting the location of survivors and delivering life-saving drugs to them before human rescuers can get there. But first, the Australian researchers must master the ability to direct the movements of the insects, which could take a while. Fitzgerald says that although the work might seem futuristic now, in a few decades, cyborg insects could be saving lives. He's not the only roboticist creating robots from living organisms. Academics at the California Institute of Technology, Caltech, for example, are implanting electronic pacemakers into jellyfish to control their swimming speed. They hope the bionic jellies could help collect data about the ocean far below the surface. In September, Cornell University researchers released robots controlled by a king oyster mushroom. The robots, which sense and respond to the environment by harnessing electrical signals made by the fungus and its sensitivity to light, could have uses like sensing the soil chemistry near crops to decide when to add more fertilizer. The rise of biohybrid robots has stirred debate about the ethics of the work, and some researchers have advocated for better regulation and oversight. Caltech academics told CNN that they worked with bioethicists to ensure its interventions don't cause any type of stress response in the jellyfish they work with. Fitzgerald says that beetles that have had backpacks attached to them have normal life expectancies. So I don't think they mind per se, he says. The science is out on whether or not they're actually conscious beings, he adds. He agrees that concerns about the welfare of the creatures are valid, but urges people to consider the benefits. I think the potential for this technology to save lives in an urban disaster, it really outweighs any kind of hesitancy you might have towards the field. Oldest human DNA reveals lost branch of the human family tree. Scientists say they have recovered the oldest known Homo sapiens DNA from human remains found in Europe, and the information is helping to reveal our species' shared history with Neanderthals. The ancient genome sequence from 13 bone fragments unearthed in a cave beneath a medieval castle in Raunz, Germany, belonged to 6 individuals, including a mother, daughter, and distant cousins who lived in the region around 45,000 years ago, according to the study that published Thursday in the journal Nature. The genomes carried evidence of Neanderthal ancestry. Researchers determined that the ancestors of those early humans who lived in Raunz and the surrounding area likely encountered and made babies with Neanderthals about 80 generations earlier, or 1,500 years earlier, although that interaction did not necessarily happen in the same place. Scientists have known since the first Neanderthal genome was sequenced in 2010 that early humans interbred with Neanderthals, a bombshell revelation that bequeathed a genetic legacy still traceable in humans today. However, exactly when, how often, and where this critical and mysterious juncture in human history took place has been hard to pin down. Scientists have believed interspecies relations would have occurred somewhere in the Middle East as a wave of Homo sapiens left Africa and bumped into Neanderthals, who had lived across Eurasia for 250,000 years. A broader study on Neanderthal ancestry, published Thursday in the journal Science, that analyzed information from the genomes of 59 ancient humans and those of 275 living humans corroborated the more precise timeline, finding that the majority of Neanderthal ancestry in modern humans can be attributed to a single, shared extended period of gene flow. We were far more similar than we were different, Priya Morjani, a senior author of the science study and an assistant professor in the Department of Molecular and Cell Biology at the University of California, Berkeley, said at a news briefing. The differences that we imagined between these groups to be very big actually were very small, genetically speaking. They seem to have mixed with each other for a long period of time and were living side by side for a long period of time. The research pinpointed a pivotal period that began about 50,500 years ago and ended around 43,500 years ago, not long before the now extinct Neanderthals began to disappear from the archaeological record. Over this 7,000-year time frame, early humans encountered Neanderthals, had sex, and gave birth to children on a fairly regular basis. The height of the activity was 47,000 years ago, the study suggested. The research also showed how certain genetic variants inherited from our Neanderthal ancestors, which make up between 1% and 3% of our genomes today, varied over time. Some, such as those related to the immune system, were beneficial to humans as they lived through the last ice age, when temperatures were much cooler, and they continue to confer benefits today. The two studies lend substantial confidence to the timing of when humans and Neanderthals exchanged genes, something geneticists describe as introgression, said evolutionary geneticist Tony Capra, a professor of epidemiology and biostatistics in the Bakar Computational Health Sciences Institute at the University of California, San Francisco. Genetic data from this crucial period in our evolution are very rare, said Capra, who wasn't involved in the research, via email. These studies underscore how having even a few ancient genomes provides powerful perspective that enabled the authors to refine our understanding of human migration and Neanderthal introgression. The scientists working on the two research projects decided to publish their work at the same time when they realized they had separately reached a similar conclusion. How Neanderthal ancestry has shaped human genes. The research in Science found that genetic variants inherited from our Neanderthal ancestors are unevenly distributed across the human genome. Some regions, which the scientists call archaic deserts, are devoid of Neanderthal genes. These deserts likely developed quickly after the two groups interbred, within 100 generations, perhaps because they resulted in birth defects or diseases that would have affected the survival chances of the offspring. It suggests that hybrid individuals who had Neanderthal DNA in these regions were substantially less fit, likely due to severe disease, lethality, or infertility, Capra said via email. In particular, the X chromosome was a desert. Capra said the effects of Neanderthal variants that cause disease could be greater on the X chromosome, perhaps because it is present in 2 copies in females, but only present in 1 copy in males. The X chromosome also has many genes that are linked to male fertility when modified, so it has been proposed that some of this effect could have come from introgression leading to male hybrid sterility, he said. The Neanderthal gene variants detected most frequently in ancient and modern Homo sapiens genomes are related to traits and functions that included immune function, skin pigmentation, and metabolism, with some increasing in frequency over time. Neanderthals were living outside Africa in harsh, Ice Age climates and were adapted to the climate and to the pathogens in these environments. When modern humans left Africa and interbred with Neanderthals, some individuals inherited Neanderthal genes that presumably allowed them to adapt and thrive better in the environment, said Leonardo Yasch, co-lead author of the science paper and a doctoral student at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig, Germany. The individuals living at Ranis had 2.9% Neanderthal ancestry, not dissimilar to most people today, the Nature study found. The new timeline allows scientists to understand better when humans left Africa and migrated around the world. It suggested that the main wave of migration out of Africa was essentially done by 43,500 years ago, because most humans outside Africa today have Neanderthal ancestry originating from this period, the science study suggested. However, there is still much scientists don't know. It's not clear why people in East Asia today have more Neanderthal ancestry than Europeans, or why Neanderthal genomes from this period show little evidence of Homo sapiens DNA. While the genome sequence from the Ranis individuals are the oldest Homo sapiens ones, scientists have previously recovered and analyzed DNA from Neanderthal remains that date back 400,000 years. Lost branch of the human family tree. The individuals who called the cave in Ranis home were among the first Homo sapiens to live in Europe. These early Europeans numbered a few hundred and included a woman who lived 230 kilometers, 143 miles, away in Zlatý in the Czech Republic. DNA from her skull was sequenced in a previous study, and researchers involved in the Nature study were able to connect her to the Ranis individuals. These individuals had dark skin, dark hair, and brown eyes, according to the study, perhaps reflecting their relatively recent arrival from Africa. Scientists are continuing to study remains from the site to piece together their diet and how they lived. The family group was part of a pioneer population that eventually died out, leaving no trace of ancestry in people alive today. Other lineages of ancient humans also went extinct around 40,000 years ago and disappeared just like the Neanderthals ultimately did, said Johannes Krauss, director at the Department of Archaeogenetics at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology. These extinctions may suggest that Homo sapiens did not play a role in the demise of Homo neanderthalensis. It's kind of interesting to see that human story is not always a story of success, said Krauss, a senior author of the Nature study. Study reveals strong genetic connection between period pain and depression. Up to 90% of people who menstruate experience pain during their periods. For some, that pain is severe and linked with symptoms of depression, which are often thought to be a result of the intense throbbing or cramps. But a new study published Wednesday in the journal Briefings in Bioinformatics suggests it may be depression causing period pain, due to specific genes the authors identified, while other researchers said the interplay of internal mechanisms is more complicated than that. Depression and menstrual pain significantly impact women's lives across the world, yet their connection remains poorly understood. Lead author Dr. John Moraros, dean and professor at the School of Science at Zhejiang Liverpool University in China, said via email. Our collective goal is to critically investigate these issues and improve care for women by uncovering these complex connections and finding better ways to address them. Menstrual pain is known as dysmenorrhea, which occurs in the pelvis or abdomen for typically up to 3 days once the bleeding starts. Previous studies have shown a correlation between dysmenorrhea and depression, but didn't establish a causal relationship at the genetic level, Moraros said. We used a clever approach called Mendelian randomization, he said. This method works like nature's experiment. It uses genetic data to see if having certain genes linked to depression also makes people more likely to have menstrual pain. This helps us understand cause and effect without the need to test it directly on people. The authors collected the genetic data of around 600,000 people from European populations and 8,000 from East Asian populations from various sources, including the UK Biobank study, the Psychiatric Genomics Consortium, and FinGen, a large-scale research project in genomics and personalized medicine. Next, we use bioinformatics, Moraros said. It helps us find patterns in the genes and biological pathways that connect depression and menstrual pain. The study contends it has demonstrated a significant causal relationship between depression and dysmenorrhea, with the mood disorder increasing the odds of menstrual pain by 1.51 times, or 51%. The authors found several genetic pathways and proteins through which depression may affect reproductive function. The research team also found that sleeplessness, experienced by some people with depression, may worsen the link between depression and dysmenorrhea. No evidence was found to support a causal effect of dysmenorrhea on depression. However, the authors said, the findings help expand the important and often overlooked discussion around mental health and period pain. I'm excited about some of the potential for some of these larger database-style studies, especially as more genetic testing is advancing, said Dr. Amory Amies Olschlager, professor of obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Washington School of Medicine. She wasn't involved in the new research, but there are also concerns about some of the study's broader assertions, according to Amies Olschlager and other experts. Where I think the paper's falling short is that because there's a strong genetic connection, you attributed that as a causal relationship, and I think it's still a stretch, said Dr. Claudio Soares, president of the Menopause Society and professor in the Department of Psychiatry at Queen's University School of Medicine in Kingston, Ontario. Soares also wasn't involved in the study. Below, experts elaborate on newfound and known associations between period pain and depression, why a genetic cause can't be inferred from a genetic connection, and ways you can manage depressive symptoms and painful periods. Two-way street between mood and painful periods. Many people who have depression or other mood disorders experience pain more acutely, said Amies Olschlager, also chair of the Committee for Clinical Consensus, Gynecology at the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. That increased intensity is due to how the brain interprets and experiences pain signals, and to depression limiting one's ability to cope with pain, she added. But Amy Zolschlager said she also wouldn't tell someone with dysmenorrhea, you must have this gene, since for many, some level of pain during menstruation is normal. Primary dysmenorrhea is caused by highly active prostaglandins, the chemicals that cause the uterus to contract during the menstrual cycle, Amy Zolschlager said. That's why ibuprofen is so effective, because it's a prostaglandin inhibitor. The disorder is also associated with early menopause, source said. Additionally, the Mendelian randomization method assumes there are no environmental factors that could influence someone's depression status, period pain, or genetics, which contradicts the fact that the relationship between those things can be multifactorial and different for everyone, experts said. There are probably also underlying mechanisms making people more vulnerable to having both depression and dysmenorrhea, source said. Since the study doesn't have more personal data at an individual level, it's unclear whether differences in individual severity and treatment of depression would also affect the results, Amy Zolschlager said. On the other hand, experts noted that the opposite relationship, period pain or reproductive shifts preceding depression, has occurred in both human and animal research and in clinical practice. We know that's true in patients with some chronic pelvic pain conditions, something we call central sensitization, where the brain becomes more sensitive to even normal stimuli and starts to feel them as painful, said Dr. Hugh Taylor, the Anita O'Keefe Young Professor and Chair of the Department of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Sciences at the Yale School of Medicine. Taylor wasn't involved in the study. In animal models, endometriosis, a secondary cause of dysmenorrhea, led to depression. Endometriosis is a chronic disease in which tissues similar to the uterine lining grow outside, rather than inside, the uterus, causing pain and fertility issues. And women with dysmenorrhea may be more likely to experience postpartum depression, Taylor added. Experts have also known for years that having your first period at an early age increases your risk for depression, source said. Managing depression and painful periods. If you're experiencing dysmenorrhea, Amy Zolschlager wants you to know a few things. First, it doesn't mean you're simply depressed. But secondly, if the pain is interfering with your life and not alleviated by treatment such as ibuprofen or heating pads, you should seek out an evaluation for mood disorders and secondary causes of dysmenorrhea, which can include uterine fibroids, an infection, or ovarian cysts in addition to endometriosis. This type of integrated healthcare can lead to more personalized treatments, better outcomes, and reduce the stigma surrounding mental and reproductive health issues among women, Morrow said. Additionally, methods experts know to be effective in treating period pain can also improve depression, Amy Zolschlager said, such as exercise, yoga, stress reduction techniques, dietary changes, and good sleep quality and quantity. Medication can be helpful when none of those things work.